It's 1975 and a low-level mafia enforcer has been summoned to the Gemini Lounge in Brooklyn, a hangout for some of the most powerful members of the Gambino crime family. Outside, Roy DeMeo greets him with a friendly smile, but in DeMeo's pocket is a suppressed pistol and a small towel. Inside the club, the crew is already waiting, armed with ropes, knives, and saws. They've done this before, dozens of times, maybe hundreds. It's just business as usual. Roy DeMeo is one of the deadliest hitmen in mafia history. His crew is rumored to have carried out nearly 200 murders, but the crazy thing is, he is not even the worst one. We're entering the blood-soaked world of contract killers on this episode of the Infographics Show. Deadliest mafia hitmen in history. Number 8. Richard the Iceman Kuklinski. Richard the Iceman Kuklinski was someone you really wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley. The Polish-American powerhouse was a hulking 6-foot 5-inch career criminal who ruthlessly murdered at least 5 people from 1980 to 1984. He was also the head of a gang of murderous thieves who lured people into what they thought were secretive business meetings, only to ambush, rob, and kill them afterwards. He got his frightening nickname, the Iceman, from his purported methods of freezing bodies to disguise their time of death. He claimed not only to have done prolific assassinations with the mafia, but also to have murdered with a huge variety of weapons, from ice picks to chainsaws. He's even claimed to some journalists and writers that he was involved in the infamous murder of the Teamsters union leader Jimmy Hoffa. While we know for a fact that Kuklinski did definitely kill at least 5 people, he's also been known to lie pathologically in order to make the story of his life and crimes more interesting. Some critics even paint him as a man who is trying to be the Forrest Gump of crime. He would die in prison in 2006, age 70, with a legacy of 20% murder, 80% fantastical fabrications. Our next hitman, on the other hand, was the bona fide real deal. Number 7. Gun Tommy D Simone. Gun Tommy was a violent, unstable maniac who also had one of the greatest honors any member of the mafia can have, being played by Joe Pesci in a Martin Scorsese movie, specifically the 1990 crime epic Goodfellas, where he was fictionalized as Tommy DeVito, widely considered one of the scariest characters ever to grace the silver screen. And the freakiest part is, the real-life Tommy D Simone was much, much worse. At the tender age of 19, Tommy joined the Lucchese crime family through his neighborhood connection with seasoned gangster Paul Vario. He and his associate Henry Hill would hijack trucks to steal their valuable goods, and Tommy always had a .38 revolver with him, which he carried in a brown paper bag. And Tommy absolutely loved killing people. Hill alleged that Tommy committed his first murder at age 17, where he said, "Hey Henry, watch this," before shooting a random bystander in the head. He channeled that violent streak for the mafia plenty of times, but thanks to his explosive temper, he often used it against his own associates. When made man Billy Batts offended him at a party, Tommy beat him to near death before later stabbing him, by Hill's account, 30 to 40 times to finish him off. And as fans of the movie will know, he later also murdered bar waiter Michael Spider Gianco for making him look foolish in front of his friends. After a short 28-year life of madness and murder for business and pleasure, Tommy disappeared off the face of the earth. Goes without saying, he was very likely murdered by his associates for his ridiculous loose cannon killings. But his body has never been found. And somehow, even Tommy D Simone looks almost level-headed when you put him up against our next malicious mafia murderer. Number 6. Crazy Joe Gallo. When even other members of the mafia are calling you crazy, you know you're probably a little off the rails. And that could definitely be said of our next mafia hitman, Crazy Joe Gallo. Though in the interest of full disclosure, his habit of quoting mafia movies and the fact that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia was also part of why he got that nickname. The son of an old Prohibition bootlegger, Gallo fell into the world of organized crime hard and fast. He ran a violent jukebox-stealing racket in his youth before joining the Profaci family. He was likely the hitman behind the high-profile slaying of rival mob boss Albert Anastasia, the chief of Murder Inc. More on them later. When Crazy Joe felt like he hadn't been properly rewarded for the Anastasia hit, he started a war against his own boss in the Profaci family. He kidnapped Frank Profaci and kicked a series of mafia murders into action that left plenty of blood in the streets. He would soon be arrested for his antics and sentenced to nearly a decade in jail, where he made the rare move of crossing the racial boundaries in organized crime, hiring black men to join his criminal syndicate once he was out of jail. And once he was released, he decided to lay low for a while, rethink his life, and pursue his prison hobby of painting as a serious career. No, he didn't. He got one of his associates to attempt a hit on Joseph Colombo, the new head of the Profaci family. The hit failed and the shooter was traced back to Crazy Joe. It was clear that he wasn't going to let up. Colombo needed a more permanent solution to the Crazy Joe Gallo problem, and being a well-connected master criminal, it didn't take long to find one. The vicious fun came to an end on April 7, 1972, when Joe and his family were celebrating his birthday at a Little Italy seafood joint called Umberto's Clam House. While he was trying to enjoy a dinner, a gunman ran up and opened fire, striking Joe several times. He kicked over the table to try to make a shield between himself and his assassin, but the damage was already done, and after trying to return fire, he stumbled out into the street, where he fell to the ground and bled to death in the gutter. But when it comes to the history of the mafia, Crazy Joe was new wave. Let's wind back the clock a little bit to a certified classic in the dirty, dangerous business of contract killing. Number 5. Abe Kid Twist Relis. Kid Twist might not be the most intimidating name out there, but you'll certainly start getting nervous when you hear about the organization he worked for, the infamous Murder, Inc. Before becoming a mob hitman, Relis was actually a mob hitman fanboy. He took his name from a violent Jewish mobster that he looked up to, Max Kid Twist Zweifach. After making a name for himself as the leader of his own little Relis gang, he attracted the attention of larger New York crime families. Relis and other low-level mobsters started to perform hits on the mobsters' behalf. This formed the basis for Murder, Inc., the informal murder-for-hire business that acted as a kind of iron fist for organized crime in New York City. It's believed by some estimates to have killed between 400 and 1,000 people. They'd have an impressive reign of terror until it was all brought down by an unexpected person. Abe Kid Twist Relis himself. He decided that he'd had enough of the criminal life and willingly became an informant to the feds. The information he provided helped to solve 85 different murder cases. Clearly, he was pretty well wired into the hitman community. But in 1941, Kid Twist's decision to rat on his fellow assassins caught up with him when he took a mysterious fall from a high window in the Half Moon Hotel on Coney Island in New York. The floor that Abe was staying on was nicknamed the Squealer Suite by police because he and 3 other hitmen who decided to turn informant were all kept there under heavy federal protection. Not that this protection saved Kid Twist. It's alleged that Abe tried to climb out the window. Some say to escape the police, others think it was just a prank or maybe a desperate attempt to see his wife and family. But somewhere in the chaos, he tripped and fell. At least that's the official story. Naturally, not everyone bought it. Many believe he was forced out that window and fell to his death intentionally. It just wasn't his intention. But as mobsters who decided to turn informants go, Abe seems like a downright sweetheart compared to our next murderous mobster. Number 4. Joseph the Animal Barboza. Massachusetts mobster Joseph Barboza, also known as the Baron, the Wild Thing, and the Joe Valaki of New England, is one of the most sadistic psychopaths on this list. Working for the Patriarcha crime family in the 1960s, he was a man so dangerous that even getting arrested by the FBI wasn't enough to slow down his rampage. Barboza did a little bit of everything for the Patriarchas. He was a leg breaker and a debt collector, jobs that his history as a prize-fighting boxer helped him excel at. And of course, he would happily kill people for money or pleasure. He racked up 11 confirmed murders over the course of his criminal career, with who knows how many others still hidden in the East Boston dirt. A big part of his nickname was because he liked to use his teeth as part of his violence. He once chewed off a part of an enemy's cheek and spat it back at him. Another time, after blowing off part of a victim's skull with a gun, he picked it up and gnawed on it, all to boost his fearsome reputation on the streets. Speaking in a 1970 TV interview about how he'd treat people who didn't pay him back, he said, quote, "I'd stab guys after 14 weeks who still continued to hide. You know, I'd stab them in the face, I'd stab them in the legs, I'd stab them in the arms, I'd stab them in the chest." He put his love of stabbing and shooting to good use during the McLean-McLaughlin gang war of 1965, where he personally claimed to have killed 26 people. He took even more lives for the Patriarcha family afterwards. It seemed like his crime spree would be over when he got picked up as an informant or a stool pigeon for the FBI, but he actually continued killing people in witness protection. The feds just covered for him because of the valuable information he was giving, even putting some innocent people in jail for his crimes. The twisted life of the animal was brought to an end when he was ambushed and shot 4 times with a shotgun, putting him down for good. In the aftermath of Barboza's assassination, his own lawyer, a man by the name of F. Lee Bailey, said, quote, "With all due respect to my former client, I don't think society has suffered a great loss. The man who was believed to have murdered Barbosa, another mob hitman named Joseph Anthony Russo, also made hitman history with the slaying. He was the first gangland assassin to kill someone who was a part of the witness protection program. But Barbosa would probably be quaking in his boots if he ever met our next hitman. Number 3. Roy DeMeo. Unlike a lot of other people on this list, Roy DeMeo didn't have a famous nickname. That's because being Roy DeMeo was terrifying enough. He was the boss of the terrifying DeMeo crew, an arm of New York's Gambino crime family, who was believed to be responsible for around 200 murders in the 1970s and 80s. And the lion's share of those murders were committed by DeMeo personally. Not only was he a completely ruthless monster, he was also an innovator in the world of body disposal. He pioneered his own trademark practice of making bodies disappear that came to be known as the Gemini method, named after the Gemini Lounge where the DeMeo crew hung out. DeMeo worked as a butcher's apprentice before becoming a mafia hitman, and he found plenty of creative and disgusting ways to transfer over those career skills. Like a lot of the hitmen on this list, he had plenty of ways to supplement his income. Loan sharking, dealing drugs, selling stolen cars, pimping, and making and selling, well, let's just say adult cinema. But murder was where Roy truly excelled. He had the motto, no body, no crime. And on this basis, he took a real joy in making sure almost nothing of that body was left for people to find. Which brings us to the Gemini method, which involved luring victims to the Gemini Lounge before surprising them with a shot to the head from a suppressed pistol. The DeMeo crew would then wrap a towel around the victim's head and then drag them to a nearby bathroom. They'd be stabbed in the heart to help drain the body of blood like a pig ready for slaughter. Afterward, they would dump the body piece by piece into a nearby landfill. But in the end, he was just another victim of the mafia's tendency to backstab one another when the chips were down. DeMeo was subpoenaed to testify in a racketeering case. The higher-level Gambinos like Paul Castellano and members of his own crew started to worry that he'd become a stool pigeon and avoid getting a lifetime sentence. In the end, his own crew turned on him. They lured him into a garage and executed him with 7 shots to the head. His body was stuffed into the trunk of a Cadillac and abandoned in a Brooklyn parking lot. He who lives by the gun often ends up dying by it. Number 2. Giovani, the People Slayer Bruska. Some members of the mafia have limits or even a kind of moral code. But Giovani, the People Slayer Bruska, also nicknamed the Pig and the Butcher, was not one of those people. He would kill anyone from high-ranking public officials to innocent civilians, and he did it with an abnormal level of sadism, even for a mob hitman. He was a devoted employee of Toto the Beast Riina, one of the most powerful mafia bosses in Italian history. So when his boss became the target of hotshot anti-mafia prosecutor Giovanni Falcone, Bruska felt a duty to defend his interests. Going up against the mafia in Italy in the early 90s was about the bravest and most dangerous thing a man like Falcone could do, and he was about to pay for it dearly. In 1992, Bruska led a team who put around 1,000 pounds of TNT under a highway where Falcone and his entourage were going to be driving. The lawyer was blown to Kingdom Come, along with several others who were just unlucky enough to be on the road at the same time. After this, Bruska went on the run, but some of his worst crimes were still to come. When he heard that one of his old colleagues was collaborating with the police in 1993, Bruska plotted a despicable revenge. He had his own men dress up as cops and kidnap the associate's 13-year-old son, Giuseppe Di Matteo, all because his dad snitched. Giuseppe's body was never found. And in an incredibly cruel irony, when Bruska himself was arrested in 1996 after years on the lam, he snitched to lessen his own sentence, meaning Giuseppe's death was truly for nothing. In 2021, Bruska was released from prison after serving out his sentence, much to the frustration of the families and friends of many of his victims. But he doesn't claim our top spot. No, that dubious honor goes to the top hitman of the most famous mobster of all time, and one of the alleged conspirators in history's most infamous mafia massacre. Number 1. Machine Gun Jack McGurn. When it comes to mafia prestige, you don't really get any higher than being one of the made men in Al Capone's Chicago outfit. As Capone's favorite assassin, Jack McGurn killed at least 22 people in the 1920s, including bosses of rival gangs like Jaime Weiss. He often led the charge during raids and gang wars, and when it came to guns, he had a preference for automatics, hence the nickname Machine Gun Jack. In 1929, Chicago was rocked by the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 members of Chicago's North Side mob were murdered execution-style in a garage in Lincoln Park. two members of Capone's gang dressed as police officers and used this disguise to force the men to line up against the wall. Then two other members of the Chicago outfit entered the garage, and with a mixture of shotguns and Thompson submachine guns, also known as Tommy guns and Chicago typewriters, they opened fire and murdered all 7 men up against that wall. When the Chicago police arrived, only one man was clinging to life, bleeding from 14 bullet wounds, a mobster named Frank Gusenberg. And as he was taken away to the hospital, he just kept repeating, "I won't talk. For God's sake, get me to a hospital," only to expire hours later. To this day, it's one of the most well-known incidents of murder in the long and bloody history of American organized crime. While the coordinated hit was carried out at Capone's behest, many suspected that good old Machine Gun Jack was the real brains behind the operation. However, he managed to skirt justice by using his girlfriend, Louise Rolfe, as an alibi for the day of the murders. That hasn't stopped the accusations from sticking to Jack in the public eye for almost a century afterward. But like most of the mobsters on this list, karma came for Machine Gun Jack in the end. When Al Capone went to jail, one of Jack's biggest rivals took over the Chicago outfit and cut him out of their lucrative syndicate, leaving him in the middle of hard times in the Great Depression. In 1936, Jack decided to blow off some steam with some buddies at his local bowling alley. However, midway through the game, 3 assassins entered and gunned Jack down. Before leaving, they tossed a Valentine card next to his body. Inside was a prophetic poem, mocking everything Jack had lost. One thing remains true in almost all these cases: if you plan on becoming a mafia hitman, you best prepare to meet your maker at the hands of another person just like you someday down the line. Now check out what happened when Italian hitman fails to complete the job. Or watch this instead.